that we're going to talk about today is the situation between Israel and Palestine escalating. Now, like most things between Israel and its neighbors, the situation is complicated. It builds off of decades of unresolved issues, but what we can say about this most recent bloodshed is that it began because of two situations. The first being what Palestinians describe as Israeli restrictions on religious and cultural practices during Ramadan, and the other involves the looming evictions of Palestinians in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood of eastern Jerusalem. Right, so the religious clashes began about a month ago at the start of Ramadan when Israeli security forces put up barriers to stop people from hanging out at the Damascus Gate, which is a popular spot during Ramadan. The situation was also made worse when Israel imposed a 10,000 person limit on prayers at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is one of Islam's holiest sites. And that 10,000 person limit meant that tens of thousands of Palestinians were turned away or forcibly removed in a series of raids into the mosque and compound, the most recent of which actually caused a massive fire. And all of that led to massive protests, which Israel tried to de-escalate by removing the barriers at the Damascus Gate, although that didn't really help much. Well,
damage done, dude.
You also had people protesting in Jerusalem over the evictions in Sheikh Jarrah. That neighborhood was built back in the 50s by Jordan when it controlled that part of Jerusalem as part of an agreement with Israel. And part of that agreement was that the families living there would be allowed to keep the homes after 3 years. Now, Jordan eventually lost control of that area, and you fast forward 7 decades, and an Israeli court has ordered Palestinian families in Sheikh Jarrah to leave their homes. That Israeli court agreeing with the accusation that the homes were illegally built on Jewish-owned land and should be returned to Jewish residents, leading to Israeli settlers moving in and effectively stealing homes. Right? Obviously, people getting kicked out of their homes has led to its own massive protests for weeks, and this weekend was no different, leading to many injuries on both sides. Also, of note, this entire situation was supposed to be settled at least legally during a Supreme Court hearing on Monday, but that ended up being postponed to an unknown date, leaving many to feel that this situation will not be resolved, and it just fuels the protests.
Right.
Also, in response to all of this, you had Hamas and its territory of the Gaza Strip deciding to issue an ultimatum for Israel to leave the Al-Aqsa Mosque complex and the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood, or that it would launch rockets. When 6 p.m. on Monday rolled around and that had not happened, Hamas decided to launch a massive rocket attack of over 400 rockets into Israel. Now, many rockets reportedly fell short or were stopped by Israel's Iron Dome defense system, but many also found their targets, injuring at least 10 Israelis and killing 2. Israel then responded by conducting airstrikes against Gaza. According to the AP, since sundown Monday, 28 Palestinians, including 10 children and a woman, were killed in Gaza, with the Israeli military saying at least 16 of the dead were militants. Both sides have also continued to bombard the other through the last 36 hours with promises to escalate the situation further. You know, this is still a developing situation. We're waiting to see what happens next, but also this is an incredibly polarizing situation. And I think a great example of that is the reaction to Andrew Yang's tweet yesterday. He wrote, "I'm standing with the people of Israel who are coming under bombardment attacks and condemn the Hamas terrorists. The people of New York City will always stand with our brothers and sisters in Israel who face down terrorism and persevere." Well, yes, you had people supporting Yang, saying that, supporting that narrative. You also saw a ton of backlash, with people like Stephanie Weiss tweeting, "As a proud Jewish New Yorker, please fuck all the way off with this vile pandering to right-wing zealots when most Jews are repulsed about what the Israeli government is doing to the Palestinians. This is repugnant, hashtag not in my name." Which actually, on that note, you had people like Ben Bram saying that this is Yang's misguided grab for the Jewish vote of New York. Others also saying, "Mr. Yang, sir, I'm kindly begging you to please get fucked." I mean, you get the point. But
no
also,
shit.
while that debate happens,
this whole thing
days,
is a bad situation.
The death toll will rise,
but
the bloodshed will continue to be used as
the Muslims are being targeted.
The violence and continue the cycle in the region. Yeah, ultimately with this
which is
story,
not a narrative we are unfamiliar
even
with.
if it wasn't one of the heavier stories today. I'd love to know your thoughts, because this brings us to the end of the show. As always,
I mean, I'm not even going to pretend to understand all of the complications and specifics of the Middle Eastern conflict between Israel and Palestine. I know what I know, and I don't know probably a lot. But I can say there's a pattern in this world, and it's odd. It really is odd, because Islam is one of the oldest religions, especially out of like the big, like what is it, the big 4, big 5 modern day religions. It's one of the oldest religions, and somehow it is the most targeted. At some point, you know, between, when did it start? 60s, 70s, probably around then. What was the Iranian conflict? Somewhere around then, there was a mischaracterization and a starting to paint the brush of like this boogeyman that was Islamic, and since in the, I mean, probably before then, but that I'm aware of, that's when things really started to get bad. I mean, look in China, you can't talk about this very much, yeah, on certain applications like TikTok or a couple others. You'll get fucking banned and video erased. But in China, they persecute Muslims. They're literally being put in camps to be like brainwashed out of Islam. And that sounds like a barbaric term, but like that is what they're doing at the end of the day. That is like, I'm not sure exactly what the specifics are. I can't, obviously I don't know, but I know it's happening. There's been Vice stories, there's been a couple other articles, there's countless people trying to speak out against it. And things happen. But so there, you have it there. You have it definitely in Europe. You 1000% have it in America, and even in fucking Israel and Palestine. They were barred off from their area. It all started at the start of Ramadan, their holiday. Like this is an antagonization, and most of the world turns a blind eye to it, and I don't get why. I don't understand why so many people have a hard time looking at a situation that's bad on all ends and acknowledging that. A lot of times people feel like they need to pick a side, you know, like, oh, this person's right, this person's right. Well, sometimes they're both a little right. Sometimes one's more right than the other, but they're both doing awful things or wrong things or going about it the wrong way, you know? And that's not good. And I don't fully understand where the justification comes in. The just ultimate justification just because you're right. Because that doesn't mean shit. I mean, you can be right and an asshole. I've done it. I don't know. I don't get it. But there is certainly a pattern of discrimination against Muslim people. Without a doubt. I mean, I think most people are pretty aware of that at this point. And that's a pretty, for some reason, deeply ingrained behavior and reaction people seem to have. There's probably a lot that plays into it that I don't think a lot of us understand. But it's honestly, it's so ridiculous. I mean, Islam is such a peaceful religion if you actually read into it. And the ironic thing is, I learned most of that at my Catholic school because we learned a lot about Islam. They're very similar. They trace back to the same tree. Essentially the same story, just different prophets. Same God, for certain. And it's crazy. It is crazy. And I can even think of the mischaracterization at points in my life when it was starting, when it was, you know, forming. It's crazy, but I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to understand the situation. I definitely feel bad for the people of Palestine, especially the people being removed from their homes. Just seems unnecessary, like an unneeded evil being done to people for the sake of power and because opportunity, just because they can't and they want to, because fuck you, you know? It feels like both of those actions were taken out of pure fuck you. And why would I ever agree with something like that? I don't want more of that. We don't need more of that. And no one certainly deserves that. So, I don't know what. Siding with Israel in this instance seems like that was a preemptive strike if fucking anything, you know? Like, that was fucked. Then again, you know, Andrew Yang is not known for his background of diplomacy. He's known for his everyman status. So, you know, there's that. And no one wants to come off as anti-Semitic, so could have even been something as little as that. Someone not thinking and just being like, well, I'm pretty sure this is the right stance to take. Or maybe he read into it a little and he really thought, hell yeah. Hope not. Because that'd be kind of fucked. But whatever. What are we going to do?